Hello, and welcome to the Modern Romantic Podcast, where we revel in romanticism through art, storytelling, nature, music, poetry, creating, and passionate people doing incredible things. Hello, I am the season for the reason. I'm Trey. And as always, I am joined by my fabulous co host, Emily. Hi, Emily.
Hi, I don't have a fancy name today, and I apologize. I'll be the season for the season.
And I am joined by the season for the season, Emily.
That's so bad.
Um, as a reminder for our listeners, if you're watching live right now, hi! You need to go listen to our other episodes. They are available on all the best podcast outlets. Just look for us under Modern Romantic, or visit the website at themodrom.com and click podcast up at the top. If you don't know by now, we do live stream all of our interviews, and you are invited to join us. Interact with our guests every Monday night at 7 p.m. Central Time. Visit twitch.tv/The Modern Romantic to follow us and subscribe. And don't forget to follow our social media accounts. We do also invite you to share us with a coworker because you can't possibly annoy them any more than you already have. Tonight, we have a very special guest with us. Emily, would you like to introduce our lovely guest tonight?
I would. Tonight, we have an award-winning filmmaker. She's based in New York, and she was once called a skillful alchemist at work by Fairy Magazine, also known as Enchanted Living Magazine. Her films have been featured in festivals and screenings around the world, including London, New York, Austin, San Jose, Hong Kong, Sydney. She's aired on PBS, and her Kickstarter was chosen as Project of the Day. Her work combines the spontaneity of myth and magic with stark reality to paint vibrant portraits of healing and personal truth. I present Lisa Stock.
Hi. Greetings from New York City.
Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you on.
I am way up at the top of Manhattan in Washington Heights in what I call Narnia, New York.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes. So when you walk out my apartment building, you see a big cliff. And at the top of that cliff is Fort Tryon Park. And so it's just gorgeous. It's all these trees and cliffs, and New York is solid rock. That's why we can build so tall. But it looks like you go one way and it's cliff and trees and park, and you go the other way and it's Broadway. So I kind of have the best of both worlds there. And I do a lot of my work inside Fort Tryon Park as well.
So do you have a wardrobe there then?
Narnia. If I could fit one in this apartment, I might, but I just have a closet.
Close enough. You never know. One day
we do have a lamppost, though. We have those beautiful, old-fashioned lampposts. So awesome. Those are all throughout the park, and you'll see those in my photography occasionally, and sometimes video. But yes, we have those. So when it snows, particularly, it really looks like you're transported somewhere else.
So cool.
And the Hudson River is right there as well with the Palisades. So yeah, it's a whole different world of New York than most people would imagine.
Yeah,
do they have electricity in this lamppost, or
yes.
do they still do okay.
Yes, and here's the thing. This is like a secret that probably the city doesn't want everybody to know, but filmmakers know. So you can actually unscrew the panel of one of those light paths and plug your equipment into it while you're on site. So I've actually filmed in Central Park and in Fort Tryon. I haven't done this in Fort Tryon, but we did that in Central Park. And then you can recharge and things like that. And you just have to screw it back up before the cost.
Is it like a regular outlet in there?
Yeah. There's all that. It depends, and it's like.
That's exciting. I'm going to have, the next time I see one anywhere, I'm going to try it.
Right. So there's, we did that once in our, and the thing is when you're filming in Central Park, and we were there, we were doing a night shoot. This was for my film, The Silent Nick and Nora. And you have to end at 11 o'clock. And when they want you to end, the cops will come around and they will shine a giant light on your production until you start packing up. It's sort of like, never mind if you have 5 seconds left, you are to get out right now and start packing up and just go. So we knew that, so we were like, okay, we're packing. But at the same time, you're like, thanks for all the light. We can pack up by that. So
that's really effective to end the production, though.
There you go. They're like out 11. No exceptions.
Yikes.
Okay. Any particular reason why it's like stuck to 11?
I guess that's just their general closing hour for the park. I think you've got people still walking in and jogging in the park after 11. I just don't think they want to have people out there with, cars and equipment and other things like that going on. They just want to make sure. But they're very accommodating. Actually, I have filmed in Central Park numerous times, and they're actually really lovely about it, no matter the size of your production. Now, I've never done a giant production, but my productions, they've always been really welcoming. And I was filming out there. They have these beautiful bridges that are made out of wood, and they look like branches. And I was using one of those old bridges in a very early film of mine about the Headless Horseman. And I just had a friend as a PA, and I said, if you could just stop people while we're filming on the bridge, that'd be great. She was like, sure. And I turn around at one point and look up, and she stopped 2 mounted policemen on there. And I was like, you can let the cops come through. But they were like, hey, we're kind of enjoying watching this, and go right ahead.
That's great.
And it's so right, so that was nice that they didn't care, and they were very accommodating. But you never know what you're going to get when you're filming anywhere in New York, but even in Central Park, it's, we filmed Brother and Sister that we were talking about a little earlier. That was a short film that I did based on Terry Winling's beautiful poem, which is sort of an answer to the traditional fairy tale. And I don't really ever identify a certain year or time period with my work. A lot of times I'm more indicative of a time period. But this was, the princess in the long gown and her, brother in a sort of I don't know if it was probably late 1800s, uniform. And at some point, this guy came walking by with a giant boombox on his shoulder and just walked right behind us. And I was like, cut. Gotta wait for that to go by.
You wouldn't be able to
ski through our set also at one point. It's just like, okay.
And that I saw that one, and you would never have known that you filmed it in a place where someone could walk by with a boombox.
All kinds
or
of
ski.
People, yeah.
It looks like you're out in the, the Black Forest somewhere. And
and that was really interesting because the night before we shot, we had a blizzard, and we got 20 inches of snow, and our hair and makeup person got snowed in. She couldn't get there. So we had her on the phone telling us what to do with our lead actress's hair, and just to, but it was perfect, and the shots are beautiful, but we kind of had to hike with all of our equipment in the snow out into this, and Central Park is amazing. I mean, you can get deep into the park and not even know you're in the city. And we had these gorgeous shots, and then we were going out the next weekend to film the second part, and it got warm and it melted everything, and it looks like a whole different season. So that just sort of worked out for us. Mother Nature kind of shined on us there to give us 2 different looks for the film.
I noticed that it looks like it was winter and fall, or fall and winter, then, depending.
I would say about maybe 10 years ago, we had a huge storm come through the city, and it completely destroyed, it knocked over trees, and you can't even get down to that creek anymore. And it also took out the bridge that I was telling you about earlier, but they have since rebuilt the bridge. But that whole area where we shot, it's all fenced off. And in New York, they kind of have this rule that they leave it where it falls, unless so if a tree falls, they just leave it, unless it's blocking a path, and then they'll just kind of cut the path and leave the trunk on either side. And I like that about the parks. They're they're manicured in areas, but mostly it's wild in that sense.
That's great.
And so, but it was just too dangerous at that point for people to really get down there now because so many trees had fallen. So I'm glad that I got to capture it on screen.
Do you have, like, I don't know how it works in New York, but I used to live near Charlotte, North Carolina, near where Trey lives, and they had just passed a city ordinance or a law. I don't know what you'd categorize it as, but it was like there were a lot of film crews coming into the city to do various projects, and to try to, I guess it was to make sure they were getting their money out of them. They passed a thing where you couldn't film in a public place, specifically public parks, without a permit, and the permit was like $2,000, and it was expensive. So people who were just doing like things for fun, if they had any professional looking equipment at all, like even a Nikon camera, you could be fined for not having a permit because they wrote the law to include photography. And so all the pro photographers were so mad because they could no longer do all their little graduation shoots in the park. But in New York, can you just go film anywhere, or do you have to have a permit?
Yes and no. In terms of photography, we have photo shoots going on all the time, and I don't think you need a specific permit for photography, for still photography.
Okay.
But for film shoots, it depends on what you're bringing in. If you're bringing in a car, if you're bringing in lights, if you're going to have some, like a huge setup, you've got to have the permit. Or if you want a space exclusive to you. So I shot, I think it was January of 2018, we were shooting in Conservatory Garden in Central Park, which is gorgeous. But we wanted the pergola specifically for us. We didn't want people walking through our set. We wanted just my actress on that pergola. So I paid to have a permit for them to shut it. And, that's, at that sense, yes, you do. I think, the Headless Horseman one, and also Brother and Sister, I didn't have permits for. But for Silent Nick and Nora and for that scene for Titania, I did. I think it just depends on the level of equipment and what you're bringing in. And, just so they want to know what you're doing and not, destroying the park. So it kind of depends. But they lay it out for you really easily on their website. And again, they're really accommodating.
That's good.
They're really easy to get a hold of. And a lot of times they really just ask for the insurance as opposed to paying them because they are city parks. So it's now, again, if it was a huge so-called Hollywood production, it might be different because they have to close, sometimes sections of parks, which, I'm, maybe on a bridge and let the cops on their horses come by in between takes. So I've never paid to use the park. I've just, had to have an insurance policy, which you have to get for a lot of independent, productions anyway. So that's kind of standard.
Okay.
So, Lisa, one thing I want to ask, because it's very clear from the places that you have premiered your works, you've been featured on PBS, you've had works across the globe. What I'm always interested in is how artists kind of describe their own work. So, how, in 4 words, how would you describe your personal brand?
Does it have to be a complete sentence, or I can just give you 4 words?
Whatever you want.
So I would say magic realism, metaphor, and myth. Those would be my 4 words for you.
I like that. What about your work? What attracts you to those sorts of things?
For me, and I think, ever since I was small, it's why I've gravitated toward the more magical films and TV shows and books out there, is because I think that magic realism and metaphor and myths can speak to all of us at once in a sense, your personal mythology. That, and I use Titania as an example for this a lot, that it's a story of a woman who's been through a traumatic experience, and she has 2 very deep scars down her back. In the actual project, you won't find out exactly what happened to her. In earlier versions of it, you did, but the more I got into the metaphor and magic realism of the story, I left it out because I feel like we've all been through grief, we've all been through hardships, we've all been through sorrow. And if I just display that by 2 long scars, the audience can put their own experience into it rather than me saying, oh, only this happened to her. Where the audience can say, well, that's never happened to me. I can't relate to that. But if you don't say it, and if you just give her those 2 big long scars and have her walk through the middle of town and try to pretend like nothing is wrong, we've all been there, And I think that metaphor can do that beautifully. And in my work, I encourage people to use their own imaginations. I want them to put their own story into my story. And I feel like if we use those fantastic and marvelous elements, it gives an audience member room to insert themselves instead of telling them what has happened and what they should be feeling from what has happened in the story. So that's why I've always gravitated toward mythology and toward the magic realism. I think the magic realism, I used to sort of be a little heavier into what I call high fantasy, which I love, but I sort of started pulling back into magic realism and setting things in more recent decades. Because again, I feel like if, we show a contemporary world, our audience will identify with it, but then there's this little magical element and they can say, oh, that's sort of like when this happened to me in my life, or, oh, my grandmother used to tell me this story about that, or, oh, I saw this happen one time. And there's so much magic in everyday life. And I think if I can bring that out in my stories, I can draw far more people in than just, one niche. So that's what I aim to do.
And I love that. For me, not how do I say this? For me, in theater, there are so many people that when it comes to the way that a story gets told or the way that directions are written plays, it's almost like a purist sort of approach that it has to be performed in that kind of context. And what I love is when storytellers, directors, artists, technical directors, etc., take that concept and they somewhat modernize it to enhance the story for a different audience, and they allow the story to breathe in a different capacity.
Right.
Just because my boyfriend and I are going to go see this next week, Hadestown is, is something that comes to mind, and they take the Orpheus myth and they update it to like this almost like 1930s Great Depression sort of storytelling. But then woven into that is a lot of those metaphors and magical realism embedded into that story.
Yes. And I'm also just, whether it's on a larger scale or a smaller scale, or it's just 1 minute in a film that does that, I think it can just really tie an entire story together. And it can also, when you allow your audience to put themselves into your story, then the emotion also pulls. And, that's what stories are about, right? And just, I feel, as I'm sure you do, there are no wrong answers. and sometimes, I do things that are a little unusual, and I might have someone say, well, I'm not sure what was going on, but I think it was this and this and this. And I'm like, great, I love that. And I want to hear what they're thinking and what they're saying, because I was always taught, and I was raised in theater. I started doing children's theater when I was 6 years old. And one of the things that I was taught was that the minute you stand on stage in front of an audience, you're giving a gift to the audience, and it is now theirs. Yes, you're playing the character. That character might be yours, or the story, maybe you wrote the script, but once you give it to an audience, it's theirs to do with what they want. And I keep that in my head when I'm making a film. And I think that's why I try to provoke audiences to really use their imagination, because I want them to take that story and go, mine. This is what I see. This is what I want to do with it. And then it lives on. It lives on past the movie theater. It lives on past the stage. It'll live on past the computer screen or the TV screen, and it becomes their own. And I think that's probably what we all aim for as storytellers.
That is such great. Yeah. That is such
or at
great.
least that's what you hope for.
Right. But what a great way to see it. It's interesting because I do photography too, and I always am like surprised to hear what when someone gives me feedback on a picture. I can kind of relate because it's not film, obviously. But sometimes I have an intention and I'm still learning this. What you said is really sound, though, that once you give it or once you put it out there, it's theirs. Because the feedback I get sometimes is puzzling or surprising, and I'm like, wow, I wasn't intending that, but I do enjoy hearing that. And sometimes the feedback is absolutely not what I expected, but it's still something that I mean, it's cool because it's something I didn't consider. So having that other lens, their lenses, is really kind of a neat thing. And if I were to be too literal or too, I guess, I don't know how else to say it, but if I were to, because otherwise I could be disappointed, and I'm glad I haven't gotten there. But I could see how someone, an artist or someone who creates, could be disappointed if they didn't open their mind to that possibility to let it be the audiences after that. That's so cool.
Well, the picture tells 1,000 words. Is that what they say? So right. And that's, I think, those just kind of stick in my head, and I feel like, oh no, this is, there's no wrong answer. And that's the beauty of art and is that we grow from it, and, it carries us through. And there are certain, we were talking about Priscilla Hernandez earlier, and there are some of her songs that have I will listen to over and over and over and over. And, they've carried me through different times in my life where they've inspired me for something. And sometimes the same song will inspire a different thing. And that's also, I hope that people would come back and watch something of mine over and over. And sometimes when you look closely, you'll see different things, because I do like to put things in the background as subtext. But that's, or I look at, we all love certain photographers and photographs or paintings, and have them hanging in our house, and, look at them over and over and see something different all the time. And that's the beauty of it.
Have you noticed that, Trey, like in your performances, when you've gotten feedback, have you ever gone, I never thought about it that way? Or
yes. Everyone interprets something just differently every single time, though there are so many schools of thought when it comes to the way that an actor moves on stage or when they deliver a line. The one in which I've been kind of been astounded by is the Meisner technique, which is whenever you're delivering a line on stage, you learn all your lines kind of robotically, and when you're in the moment, it kind of changes the way in which you think. You don't get attached to something too difficult, or too much in like the rehearsal process. You kind of let it be natural every single time. So it's always interesting when people give you feedback on things. The one thing I will say is that audiences, from my perspective, personal perspective, so the disclaimer out there, get a lot caught up in the visual elements of things versus the performance. And it's only when someone really truly reaches into the soul of the person and makes them feel something that they go, oh, and notice that person. Many times they'll just kind of focus on the visual element and not really the artistic expression of that person. There's a time I was performing as what was written as a cisgender woman. A long story. But playing a woman, so wig, makeup, everything like that, every single comment that I got was, "You look like a woman. You look like a woman. Oh my God, like you act in, like it just seems like a real woman." And it was never really about how funny I was, or they loved the delivery of this line, and oh, the way that you delivered this line tonight was really interesting. It was always and forever about the looks. And that conversation could go on much farther, but the point is that it was all about the way that I looked as opposed to my comedic performance in that given part.
Right. And being with such a heavily theatrical background, I run a lot of my productions like we did in theater, and I will rehearse with my actors like we did in theater. And a lot of times in film and TV, you don't have that rehearsal period. But for me, I feel like as a director, I'm doing all my work up front. Once we get to set, now it's their job. It's the actor's job. It's the cinematographer's job. It's the hair and makeup and costume people. It's their time. And I can direct while make sure it all goes, according to plan. But I look at myself as a director of doing all of my heavy lifting prior to getting on set. And one of the best compliments that I receive or can receive is when somebody says, "Oh my God, your actors have such great chemistry." And I work with a lot of the same people, and I will have them over for dinner, and we will rehearse and we'll read through things, we'll answer questions, and they just get to know each other really, really well. So that when suddenly they're out, and I film outside a lot, which is a little bit alarming sometimes. When we did the dream scene for Titania, it's on my Vimeo, and it's this huge sweeping hill with this house. I took my two actors, Victoria Hay and Keith Chandler, out to Central Park and had them out on a hill, and said, "I just kind of want you to get used to this space, because once we're out there, I don't want it to be distracting. There are going to be different sounds, and we're not on a stage, and we don't have cameras in your face. It's going to be a much, you're going to have birds, and you're going to have wind, and you're going to have the water." And I think it really paid off. But at the same time, I feel like I very much want my actors to get deep into their own characters as they see fit. I feel like I'm a director, not a dictator. So if somebody has an idea, I like my creatives to be creative and to be creative on set. And if they want to try something, if they have an idea, I want to hear it. If it doesn't fit, I'll let them know. But otherwise, I feel like I would really lose out on a moment of genius. And so I kind of let them breathe a little bit on set in that sense. So in the middle, they can go ahead and just, like you said, they just can grasp the moment. And even when I get it in the camera, I will often ask the cinematographer or the hair and makeup person or my actor, "Is there something else you want to try? Let's go ahead and do it." Again, I might lose out on a moment of genius if I didn't give them the opportunity to say, "Oh, I want to try it this way," or "Oh, I think I can, do this differently." And it just makes it that much more enjoyable also in the edit room, just to see those very real moments come forward through the camera.
And it's those moments that are like, that's it. I was on a photo shoot with Emily once, and we've talked about it a couple of times, but it's something that I always go back to. There was a photo shoot that we had where it was like a Lord of the Rings kind of inspired Elven shooting at I can never remember the name of this place.
Lansford Canal.
But thank you. You know the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, it's my favorite place.
So she had asked the two models to go and stand in the trees because the light was filtering through. They happened to be standing near these trees, and then all we hear is, "Oh my God, get over here!" And so we're all like running over there, and it was just stunning. The chemistry between the models, the light filtering through, it was capturing on film or through the camera incredibly, and even raw, the images were just chef's kiss, just absolutely gorgeous. And so it's those moments in particular that you just have to go,
like, you know, when it happens too.
We ran into a similar situation in the Titania dream scene. So we were out at this beautiful, it's the Marshall Fields estate out at Comset State Park on Long Island. And that I got a permit for, in case you were wondering. And we had, like, all day we could see this hawk, like, flying back and forth, flying back and forth. And we get to this moment in the scene that's probably the most pivotal moment in the entire scene. And Titania, she has to, like, pull away from Nicholas and sort of look at him, and it's all said silently. And just when that happened, the hawk flew right behind them. And in the raw footage, you can hear me and my cinematographer go, oh! and then I was like, I'm using that take no matter what. And somebody who watched it said, did you have a bird handler? And I was like, no, it was just perfect. And we were like, thank you. You know, it's just that. And at the same time, we were down on the field in front of the hill, and we had this super wide shot of Titania on the field. And we had clouds and sun that day. And just as we were taking it, the sun and the clouds just rolled down that hill just perfectly. So it's sun, and then it's shade, and then it's sun, and then it's shade. And I thought, you know, I couldn't have ordered that. So sometimes that serendipity is just beautiful.
Yes, for sure.
One thing, I was actually looking at your Instagram, and it was a post you had made recently, and if this gets too political, please say so.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
You had gotten some, in our talk about feedback, you had gotten some feedback that lighting was one of the most, like, important things that you needed to focus on in film. Right. And what was a series of, like, 6 or 7 images of incredible shots.
Thank you.
By the way. Do you ever get feedback that makes you kind of scratch your head? And how do you deal with that kind of feedback in the moment? And what do you do with it?
Well, that particular incident was, that comment came from somebody who, I don't know if they just don't know my work or they hadn't really paid attention to it. And, you know, there are, I'm going to try to be very diplomatic as I say this, people who like to talk about what they know and sometimes assume that other people don't know that and they don't know your work. And sometimes, most of the time, I can let that roll off my back, but then occasionally I'm having a day and I'm sitting there thinking, thank you for letting me know that lighting is really important to photography. You know, like Captain Obvious. Awesome. Thank you. And then I go and post something like that on, you know, that says, I hope I'm doing it right. I just like, hey. But the ones I think that I had a project I did a while ago, and I decided to open it a certain way with a particular image and sounds, and I do things that are unusual. And it was a lot of, well, why? Why did you do that? And I thought, why not? You know, it's just, it kind of draws you into the story. And I feel like I want people to answer those questions on their own. I don't want to necessarily handhold somebody through what I do. So sometimes I do get maybe a little too abstract. And when somebody wants to tell me to bring it back or explain something a little bit better, I can get a little fussy about that. But then I, you know, realize, well, they're probably right. You know, not everyone can read my mind and I need to give a little more information. But, you know, I think at my age and, you know, after doing this for 30 years at this point, I kind of feel like you go ahead and say what you want. And I know it's, you find your niche, and you find the people who, I always say, go where you're welcome, go where they're saying yes. And, my films are sometimes like film festivals don't know what to do with them. I've been in a lot of film festivals, but I'm also starting to notice recently that there are a lot more niche film festivals coming in. And I just finished a short film called The Cave. And what I've done, it's taking the story of the allegory of the cave by Plato, and instead of the folks staring at a wall with shadows, and that's the world they think is the truth, it comes into present day New York City with people looking out their windows at their neighbors and thinking that's the truth. And it also involves baking pie and sing a song of sixpence. And what I've done is you're looking at a visual of these people. Well, I'm actually in it, and I'm looking out the window at a neighbor who's baking these pies. And then there's another neighbor watching that person bake pies. And it's the sound that overlays is the sound from a bakery. So the sound is contradictory to the picture. You're not hearing me in my apartment. You're not hearing me lift the window. You're not hearing the construction workers that I'm seeing. You're hearing the sounds in the bakery. So it's contradictory to the picture, but it's complementary to the story. And I just wanted that clash of sounds to sort of, it splits your brain a little bit when you're watching it, but it all comes together into the same point. And I knew that, once I started getting that out there, I kind of had to explain what I was doing. And I'm not trying to say that people wouldn't get it. I think I was just worried that, because of those few people who go, I don't get it, because they don't want to try, and I'm just like, just watch it. Just don't think about it. Just watch it. And then, the ones I know that have seen it so far, they've really enjoyed it. And it's, I think if anything, if I get a snarky comment, it just makes me push myself even harder, or it makes me do something even weirder to sort of say, in your face. But yeah, I mean, at this point, I feel like I'm doing my own thing.
I like that you go, you either say push yourself harder or go weirder with it.
Right, yeah.
I love that.
So one of the comments I get a lot living in New York City was someone who, and again, I'll be diplomatic saying this, but I think people have a very specific idea of what life is like in New York City. And for people who haven't been here, they just have this very specific idea. And one of the things we hear about a lot, and it is true, is how small New York City apartments are. And there's that great, the movie with Jane Fonda. They move into that little teeny tiny apartment, and there's some really the bed fills up the whole bedroom, and you turn around and you're bumping into each other. And so on my Patreon, I do these things called Friday Night Theater, and talk about going weirder. That is what I do with Friday Night Theater is I give myself restrictions. I give myself parameters. So it is 1 minute or thereabouts, one shot, one story. And I see what I can do within those frames. And so I had one where there's a woman and she's at her kitchen window and she's opening up the window and she's tossing something out the window, and then she comes back and she's tossing something out the window and she comes back, and you're hearing the dialogue from the movie and about how small the apartment is. And then she walks away and suddenly this giant pigeon comes into view. So it's like, how small is it? It's so small. The pigeons are bigger than the apartments, but I was just like kind of answering to all the, the comments I get about living in a closet and, from people who have never been here and they don't know. And I think, here you go. So sometimes I like to get a little touch of humor there as I'm trying to answer somebody's snarky comment. And just put it back on them. Yeah.
Sorry, we're laughing.
I did another one for the Friday Night Theater where there was a a woman, there's a door up in the sky, and I just kind of wondered, the gods and talk about mythology, the Greek gods in particular are so human. They love and they're jealous and they get angry and they have all these human problems. They don't really act like gods like you would think, right? And so I was thinking about that one night, and I thought, well, maybe there's a goddess up there who does the laundry. And so she's up here, she's washing the stars. I call her the celestial laundress. There's just a 1-minute video of her doing the, wringing out the stars and hanging them up to dry. And then she wrings out the moon and throws it up into the sky. And the whole time you're hearing this advertisement from a 1950s soap commercial. So it kind of drives home, that this goddess is being very domestic in her, doing her everyday kind of duties. And that's another way that I kind of right now I'm really jazzed on pushing myself in terms of sound and different things I can do with sound. And I've been having some fun with that.
I like that. It's clever too, and I'm all about cleverness. So what is one of the biggest hurdles you felt you had to overcome that really paid off in the end?
Well, and this is, and for anyone who has followed my story for a while, they'll know that Titania is my heart. It is my biggest project. It is in progress. And we've had a tremendous amount of hurdles, but they've also paid off and made the story stronger. Early on, I wrote this story and the role of Titania for one of my best friends, who also happened to be my neighbor. She and her husband owned the brownstone I lived in at the time. And about 2 years into it, and I say that because, this was a big project. And so we were writing the script, and then I wrote it into 3 scripts because trilogies were all the rage at the time. And it was very much high fantasy, and then it changed, and then we cast it, and then we started, having, I think it was 2016 where we started having other cast members come in, and then it started changing. And then in 2017, she died very tragically. And at that point, my whole world the bottom fell out. And I didn't know at that point what I was going to do. And she died from a very rare brain disease. And when we knew that she wasn't going to come out of it, her aunt was in our house at one point, and she stopped me. And when I was coming in, and she opened the door and she said, "I thought you'd want to have this." And and my friend's name was Stephanie, and she handed me her script. And she said, "Lisa, we've all talked about it, and she wouldn't want you to stop. She'd be really upset. She loved this story. She loved that character. And she'd be really upset if you stopped." And so I took her script upstairs, and I could see all of her notes written in the margins and everything that she had thought about the character. Of course, we had already been working on it for over a year. And at that point, I decided I would continue on. And her husband also said the same thing to me. And probably recasting her role was professionally the hardest thing I've ever had to do. However, I was blessed with having Victoria Hay walk in the audition room that day. And I knew I couldn't replace Stephanie, but I didn't know what I was looking for. We were actually going to FairyCon, and we were going to be presenting the film and starting to introduce it to people. And her aunt had said to me, at that time, FairyCon was in Philadelphia, and she said, "Stephanie was born in Philadelphia." She's like, "I want you to go, and I want you to present it, and I want you to carry on." And so I knew I had this, I couldn't present it without having a Titania. And I saw, I don't know, maybe 40 women that day. And Victoria, I think, honestly, was the last person to walk in. And when she walked into the room, I started seeing the film in my head. I started seeing her in scenes. And I think even later on that night, I emailed her and I invited her over for dinner to talk about the role, because I wanted to tell her what had happened. In a sense, I wanted to give her an out in case it was too much. I totally understand. And she just came in and she embraced it with such grace and with such understanding and compassion. And ever since then, what she has done with Titania, she's made it her role. She's made it Stephanie's role. She's made it my role. She's made it everyone's. Like, she's very much taken Titania and turned her into that woman of metaphor that I think everyone can identify with. In every scene that we've already shot with her and what we will do going forward, I just feel like this is, it's become so much more, life imitating art, imitating life, imitating art, and having Victoria as, my ride or die with this, project. I'm like, this is great. I couldn't have asked for, a better lead actress, but she's also been a creative partner, and she's, and just to let you know that a lot of the cast members that came on in 2016 when Stephanie was still alive are still with the project. And that is something else that, or excuse me, not 2016, 2006, 2007. She passed away in 2007. And I come back, every so often, and we do a little bit more, or it changes. And one of the biggest things that I did in recent years was, as I was talking about a little earlier, is I let go of what I would consider the high fantasy, and I moved it into the mid 20th century. So it's around 1960, and it's much more magic realism. But I feel that doing that with this story, people focus a lot better on Titania's journey and less on the surrounding elements, less on the environment and more on her. And Victoria, every single incarnation I've done of that character, as well as all the others, my actors have just beautifully gone through. And they're every time I call and I say, hey, I've got something else, and they're like, yes. I cannot tell you how much that means to me, that they have stayed with this and stayed with those characters. And in all those years, we've really become like a family. And we've seen, we're all in New York, and now we all live all over. Some of us are still here. Victoria's based out of London. Keith is in California. Nikita's in California. And they still just all come back together and say, yes, what's going on. And I, as a storyteller, I just couldn't ask for more. I couldn't ask for a better group to go through this story. And then just to tell your listeners, it's a story of overcoming adversity. So there's the woman with the scars on her back, and she doesn't quite remember what's happened to her. So it's about going through the steps of grief to really get a grasp on it and come out, as I say, walk out of the dark wood and into the sunlight again. And, we've all done that. And now we've done that together, and we've had, births and weddings and divorces and, all kinds of things that we've shared together. But, there was a time, maybe I would say 8 or 9 years ago, I was a featured director at a screening of Stardust. And actually, Neil has been very kind to me, Neil Gaiman, and I've adapted a couple of his things with his blessing. And at the end of it, we were talking about Stardust, and I also love Charles Vess's illustrations, and those inspired my photo series of Yvain, which is you can get to via my website. And we were talking about Stardust, and we were talking about the film. And then the person who was interviewing me said, could I talk a little bit about Titania? And I remember that there was a woman in the audience, and she raised her hand and she asked me a question after I had been talking about Titania for a while. I don't quite remember the question, but she seemed very, very like she was leaning forward on her chair and she was really listening. And I thought, I love that. Sometimes you find that one person, right?
Yeah.
In the audience. And, we went about the discussion, and the event wrapped up, and I went out into the lobby, and I was standing there with a friend, and that woman came up to me and she was crying. And she told me that she had been through a violent attack. And hearing my story of Titania encouraged her to go home and start writing about it. And I cried the whole way home in the car, and I thought, this is why I'm doing it. This is why I'm doing that story. This is why I keep going with it. Because if there's one person who says, this helped me, or I get it, I understand it, I'm going to, move on, I'm going to write about it, or I'm going to process it, then that story has done its job.
That is incredible. I
think about her all the time. I really do. When I hit a wall, and I think, I think about her, and I think, oh, just keep going, just keep going. And we recently, so the most recent segment of Titania was a short film called Prodigal's Road. And it's sort of the short runs parallel to the larger project. And that also, it sort of encapsulates as well everything that Titania goes through in this short. And, I got a lot of my actors back together. It was amazing. And I still, though, I like anything that I do, every time I have another piece of it, I think about her. And I also think about my cast. My cast has kept me going with it for so long. And, I said in a recent interview, I said, it's like we're singing the same song to each other over and over. It's just every time we get together, we add another stanza to it. And we just keep building on this story. And I'm just so thankful. I mean, I can never say enough about that crew. I love all my actors, whether they're part of it. But anybody I like and I want to work with, I'm like, well, come be in Titania. Can be in the family. But
that's
yes,
great.
That's that last sentiment of like, oh, if I like somebody, we want to like bring them on. We had this running through line through most of our podcasts that it started out as kind of like a joke idea, and it's somewhat now become into, if we don't do this, we are going to be like laughed at.
Everybody who's ever listened.
Our big hope is to find a castle somewhere and just overtake it for like a day, a weekend, do something, and just do nothing but photo shoots, films, art, and just make that like just an overtake of a castle. And it could be a random, like a castle every single year or something. But we have amassed so many people that have been on.
Oh, I lost you for a second.
I'm sorry. I don't know what I did. I think it was me. I apologize.
Well, I was going to say we shot in a castle for the Titania prequel. It's not a working castle. It's just like the shell of a castle. But if you're looking for a castle, there's a great one on a hilltop called Sleeping Giant Mountain in Connecticut. And when you're driving into the mountain, it looks like a giant sleeping on his side. And so there's a castle for you right there, an American.
And it's where
castle.
Again?
It's in Connecticut. It's called Sleeping Giant State Park.
Okay.
And they have a castle at the top of it. Actually, tomorrow I'm going to be posting, or if you get onto, aside from my own website, Titania Film, whether you're on Instagram or Twitter, you'll see a lot of the Titania things on there as well. And I'm about to post something tomorrow that shows you that castle.
Okay.
Just for sort of a flashback. But yes, I love that idea, actually. Why not get everyone together?
Yeah. Along the way, we've invited everybody who's been on the podcast. So, of course, you are invited too.
Thank you. I would love it.
And Kaz in the chat, she makes horse armor. And
wow.
So we were going to have, someone had horses. Do we remember who? Well, I imagine if it's in Connecticut, we'd have to find somebody nearby. Yeah, but somebody had offered horses, I thought. Wait, Kaz, you have horses too.
I have a friend that works at that works with horses here in the city. There are stables there's stables all over the city actually, but she works out in Queens, so you never know.
Okay.
Get a little New York, Connecticut thing going on.
We can make this happen. there's one side note here, and I'm going to end up cutting this out of the audio part of the podcast.
Oh, okay.
we had Jasmine and Carlos on from Black Fayday, and they were one of the early ones that we had invited onto this castle takeover weekend thing we wanted to do. And we had talked to her about how one day we want to find a castle to do this, and she decided then to make the next year's Black Fayday theme royal, and then she was going to find a castle to have the big Black Fayday gala at, and she found a castle to do it.
There you go. Where there's a will, there's a way.
I forgot to update everybody on that.
That's amazing.
That's her news to tell, so I'm going to cut this out of the audio, but she did post about it on Facebook. So
that's great. That's amazing.
And Kaz said if your friend wants horse armor,
I will. I'll let her know. That's amazing.
That's the hook
horse
up there.
Armor. That's that's incredible. Yeah.
You sorry.
No, you were gonna. I was about to say you were gonna say something. Go ahead. That's what I was gonna say. Sorry.
So Lisa, you talked a bit about having an actress and having a team of people that you just want to work with consistently, or you love working with them. My question to you is there an actor, or is there a director, or is there somebody creatively that you would want to be on your film, that if you asked them and they said yes, you would be like, oh my God.
Angelica Houston?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yes. Why Angelica
Jamie Lee
Houston?
Curtis? Well, she just what could I not write for her? I mean, I just feel like she's so versatile and such a presence, but also very giving as an actress. Everything she's in, particularly the Wes Anderson stuff, who I love. I look at her and think, I've got to write something for her one day. I do have a role in mind for Jamie Lee Curtis. We'll see. Maybe one day. But there are a lot. It's just, I think Angelica Houston is just the first one that comes to mind that I think, I could write 1,000 things for her and just keep her busy for a long time. She's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
For me, she was my Morticia.
Oh, yeah.
And she was also my stepmother in Ever After.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Right. And look at how different. I mean, it's like, come on, what could you not, what could you not write for her? And I feel like that about a lot of the actors I work with. I've been working with, there's another actress that I started working with in film school. And we were both working at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in college. And she was an actress, and I knew that. And I just asked her one day to be in my thesis film, which was inspired by Maya Deren's Meshes in the Afternoon, because I also love surrealism, and Maya is also my heart. And I'm still, she's been in things of mine throughout. And her name is Diana de la Cruz. She's based in Los Angeles now. But you call and you go, I wrote something for you, and I do that. Like, once somebody comes into my fold, and first of all, no divas. I get to the point where I actually write that in my casting call, no divas, because we film outside, we film in the cold. And when we did the scene in January for Titania, and we were on that pergola, Victoria, who plays Titania, she had to be in a cocktail dress. And this is January in New York City. And what happens is, in that scene, Titania shifts the seasons. And so it goes from summer to winter, but we were filming in winter. And it was a high of 27 or 28 degrees that day. And she was in a cocktail dress. So of course, in between takes, we're putting her in her parka and we're rubbing her hands. And we had those warmers and we're rubbing her legs. And then we'd take it off and she would just be shivering. And I would call action and she would just, I don't know how she did it because I was cold. She would just calm and she would go through all of her scenes, all of her lines as many times as we needed. And as soon as I hit cut, we were like, put her coat back on, rub it in. So it's, no divas, no complaining, no, none of that. And so once I find somebody and I tell them that, I'm like, oh, you're mine. I'm just going to call you up and go, I'm sending you a script, we're going to do this now. And fortunately, I'm going to knock on wood, they've all come back. They've all, and that means the world to me. But Diane and I, Trey, I wrote a play called Surrendering, which was about two American women in Barcelona during the Spanish Civil War. Mm-hmm. And we did that as a play here in the city. We were a Samuel French finalist. And afterward, we thought, well, let's make this into a movie. So it's sort of like Your Friend Finding the Castle. We were like, well, we're going to get on a plane and go to Barcelona. And we got a camera guy to come with us. And Diana had a friend that lived in Germany that did sound. So he flew in to Barcelona from Germany with his microphone and his gear. And we walked into the film office in Barcelona when we landed. And we asked them if we could have a permit to film, and they said, oh, sure. It would take about 7 days. And we said, well, we're only going to be here 7 days. And they said, well, as long as you're not stopping traffic or doing something. We're like, no, it's the two of us and the two of them. We're fine. But the hotel we were in wasn't exactly what we were looking for. It was too modern. So we walked around Barcelona the first day we were there until we found a better hotel. And then we walked in and we got a room and we got the balcony, which is what we wanted, overlooking one of those narrow streets that when you peer around, there was the big placa. And it looked like it was the 40s. And it was perfect. It just kind of all fell in. And that was a lot of fun. There's something to be said for that, get on a plane with a camera and go kind of filmmaking. But one of the things I remember from that shoot, and Barcelona it's much smaller than New York City. And we were walking around after we would shoot, we'd go walk around and see the city, sometimes during the day, depending on when we were shooting. And every single day we saw the same man, head to toe in white. He had a white suit, he had a white hat, he had white shoes, white shirt, wow. Everything. And I got to calling him the Angel of Barcelona, because I don't care where we were, here he came, here he was. And we'd turn a corner, there he was. We'd walk this way, here he comes. And we kept running into him all the time. And I thought that was so, I don't know, there was something very magical, real about that. And one of the fun, we shot a big chunk of it in Barcelona, but then we shot with other cast members here in New York City. And Stephanie and her husband, they owned a brownstone that I lived in, and they had a backyard. So we made the backyard look sort of like a Spanish patio, and we had a whole bunch of cast members, and it was sort of maybe a place where people got together for drinks and, play the piano or whatever and yell about politics. So there is a very, and it's right during the Spanish Civil War. So the conversation got really heated, at one point between these two characters. And he was so good. He just delivered this scene so well. And when our director called cut, there were people in the apartments around us watching, and they all started clapping. And I was like, oh, suddenly it turns into theater, but that's very much New York City, is that what's going on out your window? And there are people just like this, like watching everything we were doing from their windows. And that was really fun as well. I'd like to, though, if I may, just give a shout out to the director of that film, Julie Powell, who recently passed away. Julie wrote the book Julie and Julia about Julia Child. And she was and she was I knew her, I worked with her husband at the Museum of Natural History for years, and she directed the stage production of Surrendering, and then she went on to direct the film. And so I just want to tip my hat to her tonight. And wherever you are, Julie, we made a good story together. So I'm glad I had that experience with her.
Oh, yeah.
But that's also one of those, just to switch gears a little bit, when we were filming on the balcony, we didn't have a lot of equipment because we were, I actually carried one of those old fashioned typewriters with me from New York to Barcelona, like one of those that comes in a case and it's got the big keys.
Yeah.
And when I was going through customs, I think it was in Amsterdam, actually, they opened it up and he says, "Oh, Jessica Fletcher." And he like, puts it back down.
Jessica
Fletcher. Right. And I, and let me carry it through. But we were filming out on the balcony a lot. And I just remember this was so funny. We didn't have a reflector and we really needed, so we got the pizza box from lunch.
Yeah.
And at one point, if you look closely enough, you kind of see me go like this, and then suddenly it lights it up. Because when you're, 25 and you're doing guerrilla filmmaking, that's what you do. And it's fun. It's just fun. You're getting out there, you're telling your story, and you're having a really good time. So it's yeah, I like getting creative in more ways than one on a set.
That's great.
The only story that I have about customs, just really random. So in Amsterdam, I think I told the story last week, was the other week was about how I bought from a Dutch bakery just a bunch of like buns, and I like to be frugal with my money. And
but why?
I was going to say, you have no books on your shelves behind there.
He's in the middle of moving.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of selling my house, so all of my books and things are at my boyfriend's place. I was not expecting that.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Anyway, buns. We were talking about buns.
Buns. So I had taken these buns and I put them in my backpack, and I had put them in there like 2 days before I was leaving because I was planning on making a bunch of sandwiches, and I left them in my bag all the way up until I decided to travel. I get all the way through to American Customs, and randomly my bag went off, and I was like, what is in there? I don't remember putting anything in there. And it was right about the time that he opened up the bag, pulled out the loaf of like buns that was in my bag, and they were all smushed like all together. And he just goes, "You still want these?" And I was like, "No."
No.
Can you break them apart?
I'm good.
Make some bread pudding.
Smushed back to dough.
That was it.
Well, see, those are good stories.
At least he didn't go, Jessica Fletcher.
Jessica Fletcher, that was hilarious. So I used to work for, as I said a minute ago, I used to work for an archaeologist at the Museum of Natural History, and we dug on an island off the coast of Georgia called St. Catherine's Island, and they had wild boars on the island that the Spanish had brought, I guess, as a food source. But we were, and we would have, some interns and scientists that would come with us. And there was a biologist with us one day, and she found a skeleton of one of the boars, and she wanted to bring it back with her. It was just like perfect, the vultures had cleaned it for her and everything. And so she went and got it and cleaned it and packed it up, and she was going to really clean it when she got, but it was just a perfect skeleton that in nature had, just gone down to the skeleton. So she took it with her and she put it in, she checked it into baggage. And when we were on the island, it was like you were on the island. It wasn't, you had to get on a boat and go out into the intercoastal waterway for 30 minutes. And you didn't come off the island for like 2 weeks, we bring all of our groceries and all of that with us. Unless you got hurt, then they'd airlift you off. But, other than that, we were just like on this island with wild boars. They had, the Wildlife Conservation Society had a huge sort of repopulation program going on. They had lemurs and they had kudus and Jackson hartebeests and zebras, and they had macaques and they had giant radial turtles. And so you're kind of, out in the middle of the wilderness, right? But we did have cabins that we stayed in, and the lemurs are adorable. But coming back into New York City, you kind of had to have a minute to shift. And so we all flew back one morning, and you know how Americans are. The minute you hit the tarmac, everybody's up, they're getting the luggage out, and we were just sitting there, and we pull into the gate, and we're all just like, we're going to let everybody else get off. And you can hear the door of the plane open underneath, and you can see the little belt go up and the baggage start to come out. And suddenly one of the baggage guys screamed. It was like, ah! And I was like, Marion, that's your pig. I was like, he's got it. And sure enough, it had opened. I was like, you didn't pack it well enough. But they did let her take it. They did let her take it. And so she'd have her biological little specimen there. But we knew the minute. And everybody ran over to like that side of the plane. And we're just all sitting there like this going, no. No.
And they've got a story to tell now, too.
Well, and I think also working for an archaeologist for so long influences a lot of what I do, too, as well as magic realism, because there are definitely some things that I learned about that you would never even know existed, and so it's a very, I mean, it's hard science, but it was a very magical place in a lot of ways. And so I think that has often influenced what I do as well. Trying to keep life interesting.
Yeah. I hate to interrupt, but we had a toast to Caponis just happen, and I forgot that I was watching the wrong chat. Caponis was one of our moderators and helpers for the podcast and helped us get started, and he passed in June. So
I'm sorry.
We put up every now and then someone in the audience can redeem points for a toast to Caponis, where we just basically drink whatever we're drinking right now.
Awesome.
So
let's do it.
To Caponis.
Let's do it. Yes.
His real name is Joe Capone, but he went by Caponis, and he had a Twitch channel called Caponis. And
nice.
We miss him.
Well, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you
Lisa,
for that.
Oh,
sorry, Trey.
No, it's all good. Lisa, alive or dead, who is someone that you would love to sit down and have afternoon tea with?
Well, Maya Deren, as I said before, if I could just sit down and talk to her. She had a very interesting life, not only a filmmaker, but a dancer. She also was an anthropologist, too, and did a lot of documentary work down in Haiti. And I would definitely just want to sit and let her, or just watch her on set, just watch her create. Honestly, I think that, and I didn't get the chance, but Ursula Le Guin, who is a storyteller I absolutely adore. And there have been documentaries, but just to sit in front of her or listen to her talk or ask a lot of questions about storytelling and imagination. I think she was also quite an advocate for, using your imagination and valuing imagination. We all were born with one. So I think that we can continue to use it throughout life. And probably those two are at the top of my list. So, well, I would also put in there Jean Cocteau. I would love to just get into his brain a little bit, as well as Georges Méliès, who was the first, as far as I'm concerned, the first fantasy filmmaker making fantasy films when they were silent films, and he was doing incredible special effects in 1902, wow. And I think without him, a lot of us would be further behind than we are now. So yes, I think those 3 or 4 definitely.
That would be quite a tea party.
Yes, it would. That would be fun. That would be fun. That would be super fun. So a few years ago, I did a short film called Losing Time, and it was because I happen to be a Tim Burton fan. And this was actually the LA Film Festival, and Danny Elfman were doing a challenge where Danny Elfman was letting filmmakers use a piece of his music for their films. And just we were talking about funny stories. Losing Time is on my Vimeo page. And we it was great. We out of over 200 entries, we came in number 15. So I was very happy with that. But there's this scene where another one of my very dear friends, Joanne, who is a magnificent photographer and cinematographer, was the DP for this particular short. And and Joanne and I have known each other since film school. So we've known each other since we were 17 or 18 years old, and we hardly have to talk to each other. We just kind of know instinctively what we want. And we were filming a scene where we needed to pull into a parking spot. And I wanted it from the driver's point of view. And I was the driver, and so we kept driving around in circles in the parking lot into the spot and backing up and driving around. But because it was my point of view coming in, because you had to see another character right in front of the car, we're driving around, and Joanna's almost in my lap with the camera. She's sitting on the side, like kind of doing this with the camera as we're driving around. And I looked at her and I said, when we're 80, we're still going to be doing this kind of stuff. I was like, we're just never going to stop this. But that's like, I don't know, those kind of moments are the ones that just define how I work. And I think sometimes when I think of Méliès, I mean, he was just trying stuff, and he was a magician, and he was, he built toys, and he was a really fascinating person, but, he built it and said, let's try it. Let's see if this works. And if it doesn't, I'm going to make it work. I'm going to figure out how it works. And a lot of times I feel like I do that as well, particularly when I'm editing. I still make mattes, I still make, particularly even for Prodigal's Road, which is more along the traditional lines of filmmaking. I still overlaid clouds, in the sky. I still put things, into the frame that I create in Photoshop, and then I pull them over and stick them in. And Photoshop and Premiere Pro actually talk to each other, which is great. And I did a lot of mattes for The Cave, which the trailer is up on Vimeo now. It's hopefully going on the festival circuit, so the whole film isn't up, but I did a lot of matte work for that film. And when you make a change in Photoshop and you save it, it just automatically goes back into Premiere Pro.
Oh, nice.
So you can go back and forth.
Yeah.
And I do that a lot. I like things to sort of look like storybooks or picture books. And so that's one of the concepts that I use a lot, which may be very old school in a way, but I really enjoy how it looks. I like things to almost look like paintings at time. And I have this book, this Méliès book, that I sit sometimes at night in bed and I just flip through it. And I look at all the set pieces that he created, and I look at the colors that he used. And, I've been walking around, my parents will tell you, since I was about 4 years old, telling people I was going to be a movie director because of The Wizard of Oz. And when I was little, dating myself here a little bit, it used to come on once a year at Thanksgiving. And I was just mesmerized. And, my dad telling me, oh, that's a movie. They make those in Hollywood. And I thought, okay, yes. But I still look at that film and how colorful it was, and how much of it is filmed in the forest and, through the window and through the doors, and all of that, the colors, the windows, the doors, the forest are still so prevalent in everything that I do, that I'm like, well, no wonder, I've been walking around since then. And fortunately, I had parents that just encouraged it. I think they were like, okay, she's been telling us since she was 4, she's going to do this. And so, they sent me to film school, and, they've just encouraged it, and have, been, they're on my Patreon. I mean, they really support it.
That's great.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, that we just encourage one another to continue to use our imaginations, and the things that we were drawn to when we were small are still meaningful, and still have a purpose. And it's not, childish at all. It might be childlike in some ways, but it's certainly not childish. And I think, the stories that I tell, very much adult themes. I don't think kids would really get a kick out of what I do, but because the themes are certainly more mature, maybe something they haven't been through yet, but we don't escape, this life without going through those. So I see myself sort of, still pulling from my childhood but then interpreting it for my current life.
I really like that you bring up that what you are talking about is still inspired by what you did as a kid. So often I feel like, and maybe other people have voiced this concern before, but I feel like we lose a lot of that imagination, or when we want to go back to those things that really inspired us as kids, it was kind of frowned upon. And now in more modern society, it's like, no, dig into that, give into that a little bit more. One of the things that I found early on in my days were like the Ghibli films.
Yes.
And I cannot get through some of those films without crying, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his themes, he has war, and I mean, his themes are, they're not light.
Oh.
Yeah.
The one that I think that I love the most, and just because it's so pure in its storytelling, is Kiki's Delivery Service.
Yes. Yeah.
And oh my God, how could you not love that story?
Yeah.
Side note, my boyfriend just bought off of Etsy this My Neighbor Totoro lamp.
Oh.
It has like images, and these images of Totoro, and we're going to stick it out on our porch.
Nice.
And kind of light it up at night. And we both just, anyway. So before I get onto too big of a diatribe.
No, I'd love to hear it.
So it's so interesting to have those themes come back, and then we reinvigorate them into something new.
Absolutely. And last summer, so I live close to Fort Tryon Park, and they show movies in the park. And last summer they were showing The Wizard of Oz. So I go out there. First of all, if you haven't watched The Wizard of Oz in a room full of adults, please do, because it's a whole different experience. And it's like you suddenly realize, oh, the adult jokes, and the jokes about people not having brains and stuff like that. It's a whole new experience. Now the kids were completely wrapped, but the adults were having all kinds of fun. But Margaret Hamilton's grandson, who must be about my age, lives in my neighborhood. And so they had him come and introduce the film and talk about her. And when I was little, the witch just like terrified me. I had all the Wizard of Oz dolls except the witch, because she was so, now I have a mug with the witch on it because I love her. But he was telling us that, and I thought there's such a great story about imagination. When he was watching the film, the first time he saw it, he said he was about 5 or 6 years old. When his dad thought, okay, you can sit down and watch this. And he knew his grandmother from Elmira Gulch in the beginning. He was like, well, that's her. But he didn't recognize her as the witch. And so his dad didn't say anything. He just let him watch it. And when it was done, he said to him, well, what did you think about the movie? And he said, I don't like that woman with the green face. And so, not knowing that was his grandmother. And so his dad said, well, that woman with the green face is coming to see you tomorrow. And he was just like, and he was so nervous and so scared, like all night. And he said, like, the next day when the buzzer rang in their apartment, he ran and hid behind the couch, and then in walked his grandmother. And he was like, what? And then she explained to him, I played that role too. And, that's not, me, I was playing a part. And I just thought that was such a great story about, the imagination of a child, that he wouldn't even see his own grandmother, for the witch. And, it was fun. And he said that she used to hang every Halloween. She would hang, they let her keep the dress, and she would hang it on the front door. And the little kids, of course, wanted to come knock on her door and get treats. But, that was a great story.
Yeah, I want to go knock on the door just so I can see the dress.
I'm right. Exactly.
Yeah.
He probably has it. But, I think I agree. I mean, even the stories, that our parents read to us, or the books. I mean, I think I still have, this is a stupid story, but for some reason I had the Dick and Jane books, and I used to write my name in the book, and for some reason I would write Lisa A+ stock. I don't know why I was giving myself an A+.
You're manifesting your own grade.
I made the mistake of telling one of my current coworkers that story. So now every time he emails me, or every time he said he emails Lisa A+ stock, Lisa A+.
That's awesome.
So, Emily, now we need to, on the title card for this episode, we need to change it from Lisa stock to Lisa A+ stock.
You know, I was just typing it now.
Since I'm not the season for the reason, I can. There you go. I've got my name now.
Congrats!
Now. Thank you. Thank you.
You also get an A+ for this episode.
Oh yay! I'm so excited.
In that light of like inspiration things, are there any projects that you have upcoming, or any projects that you hope will happen soon?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited that this week I am traveling to Pennsylvania and talking about childhood. I have a photographic print in a show at the McCarl Coverlit Gallery, which is inside the Fred Rogers Institute. So all of those years of watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and now to have a print in a gallery there, I'm really excited. It was you can see it on my social media or my Flickr page. It was an image that was inspired by Magritte's Son of Man, which is the painting with the bowler hat and the apple in front of the man's face. But I did this during COVID, and it's a woman in a red bowler hat with a mask on. But it had a lot of similar themes, in that, you know, being the seen and unseen, and kind of being frustrated in a world living behind masks for so long. And so the show is actually about masking in America, particularly, you know, how it affected us culturally and artistically during the pandemic. But I think it's also going to get into the history of masks. So I'm very excited about that. It opens this week and it runs through February for anybody who is near Pittsburgh or Latrobe, Pennsylvania. I also have, Titania will be continuing as well, but I have another short film that I shot this summer, also in the park. It's a sort of an experimental take on Cinderella. And yes, but it takes place, again, like I said, I don't usually say a year, but it has hints of like the 70s. And I had 3 actresses who are also playing Glass, Ashes, and Midnight. And the photographs, the Cinderella is a photographer, and then the photographs somewhat come to life at different times during the story. It's about overcoming your naysayers, and we've all had those in our lives. So Cinderella's stepsisters were horrible to her and saying awful things to her. So it's coming above, putting yourself above all of that at some point in your life and moving on from it. And then I'm also going to be working on a couple of other things. One is a new photo series called No Good Deed, which is a series of very interesting mugshots. I'll just leave it at that. And then I have another, it's an interesting project. It'll be video and photo. And that's going to be about sort of taking a stand, but it has a lot of magic realism elements to it as well. So I've got a few things in the works, and the cave hopefully will be around on the festival circuit. We should start finding out very soon about festivals that we make it into. So that's what's coming down the pipe.
Exciting stuff.
Thank you.
Can't wait to see.
I'm almost scared to ask, what does your day-to-day planner look like with all of these things upcoming?
Because I also have a full-time day job.
Of course you do.
It's very colorful. I have multiple lists, and I also color code everything. So I know exactly what I'm working on when, and what has to get done at what time, at what date, and just staying ultra organized is how I make that all happen. But I love
Imagine.
it. Mm,
That would be the only way.
yeah. Yes. Color coding is my friend.
Which,
So if you,
oh,
oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Nope, you.
So if you would like to donate to Lisa's fund, you can go check out her Patreon page.
Yes. Thank you.
You can also donate if you drink coffee. You can also donate in the form of like Starbucks rewards cards and gift cards so that she can keep up with such an incredible schedule.
Yes, the Patreon folks get to see everything first, and for $1 a month, they get all the finished products. So they can see all the Friday night theaters, and they see all of the finished films and videos and photographs, and then the tiers go up from there. But yeah,
Awesome.
that's when we were making it happen.
Excellent.
Awesome.
So speaking of making it happen,
Yeah.
how if there was somebody who like you who wanted to get into filmmaking or do something like what you're doing, what advice would you give them?
Know your craft. I know not everyone goes to film school, but I was so thankful. I was so grateful that I was able to go. But I think, even still, I am still reading about my craft. I'm still discovering new pieces for filmmakers I've loved for years. I'm just, reading a lot of the theoretical and critical essays about film, because film has its own language. And when you really learn to use that language, that's when I think, you'll find who you are as a filmmaker. And so that goes, one step further from saying, do your own thing. It's learn your craft and learn which filmmakers, you like and why. Why do they inspire you? And just dig deep into yourself to do it. Fortunately for filmmakers, we live in an era where you can go make a film. I mean, Orange was shot, that was nominated for an Oscar a few years ago, and it was shot on a cell phone. We can do that. It's just about learning the language of editing, learning the language of storytelling through imagery and through editing, through dialogue, through performances, and how that all works together seamlessly. And that, when I see someone like I was saying with Wes Anderson, he's found his language. Tim Burton has found his language. Alfred Hitchcock found his language. And when I shot Prodigal's Road, I said to my DP, I said, think Antonioni, but magical, and it's all those big sweeping landscapes and how you put people into your landscape. So a lot of painters influenced me, like Wyeth and Doré, who, will put people into large sweeping landscapes. And I do that a lot. And it's, I think I would just really encourage people to find their own voice through the film language. And there are a lot of amazing resources out there to do that. And it'll find its way. I said I sometimes, with some of the stuff I do is maybe a little hard to place. There are more niche film festivals out there, which is great, but then you're going to meet more people who are thinking like you, and you can inspire each other. However, at the same time, I find that there is a much wider audience for things that might seem niche. And that's one of the good things about having the internet and social media, is that maybe somebody who wouldn't go to a film festival or wouldn't normally look at something like that would see it. And we had the good fortune of having Prodigal's Road accepted into CineQuest in 2020, and that's an Oscar qualifying film festival. So, we were like, hey, we're up there with the bigwigs, and it was nice. It was just nice to, have that opportunity. So find your crowd, find your language, and work on it, and just keep putting it out there. And don't be afraid to reach out to people and say, hey, I like what you do. Do you want to collaborate? I've done that a lot and have had really, have had great experiences through that. And, just say yes. Try push your own boundaries. You'll know if it's working or not. just go ahead and push it. And, it's fine to fail. I think sometimes, the director will come out in their first feature and it'll be a huge hit, and then their second one tanks, and for some reason they're unforgiven. And I think, well, why? We have to be able to try new things and let directors succeed and fail and try and do something different, and they're going to figure it out. And that's why there are auteurs out there that people love. Whatever it is they're doing, they run to the theater to see it because they're relating to it. So really, I would just encourage somebody to just find their language, try something new, shoot it on whatever you have. And, editing software you can purchase, and you can YouTube and Google and teach yourself how to do it. And ask people, there's certainly no shortage. I don't think, it's, having top gear, there's certainly something to be said for that. But at the same time, if you're a storyteller, it's, go tell your story, and don't let budget, which is a huge obstacle, don't let that stop you. Just go tell your story and do good work, and treat people really well who are working with you. They'll come back. That's a big thing. And if somebody doesn't treat you well, you don't have to work with them again. In fact, you can also write them out of your movie if you're not happy with what's going on. There's just no room for it. We're all creatives, we're all storytellers. So, have respect for one another, and, go have fun, and go, make something meaningful or profound, whatever it is you want to do. You'll find your family, and, treat them well, treat yourself well, and it'll show.
Well said.
That's Lisa A+ stock, ladies and gentlemen.
Yay!
For sure, though, I love that you said to treat others well. I believe that is the pinnacle of importance.
Yeah. And you need to have a sense of humor. You need to definitely have a sense of humor. So if I can tell another,
of course,
here at the end, a guerrilla filmmaking story. Okay, sometimes I go into a studio and we ADR in a studio, and then sometimes I just go in my bathroom where I've got towels and the shower curtain to buffer it. And I had one of my actor over from the cave because he needed to record some voiceover for the picture. And we went into my bathroom to do it because my neighbor upstairs is a concert pianist, which most of the time is really lovely because they're really good. So I get like a free show.
Yeah.
But, they also start at sometimes the most inopportune times. So I was like, well, let's go into the bathroom and shut the door. And I neglected to say, but don't shut it all the way because you can't, it's a New York City apartment, right? So at the time you couldn't get out of the bathroom from the inside, and it was good, like, the first time I discovered that, like, my boyfriend was here so he could get me out of it, and ever since then I would just shut it all the way. But we went in there and my actor shut it, and that was it. We were locked in, and I was like, oh my God, okay. And so I called my boyfriend and I said, I think you're going to have to come up here and get us out of the bathroom. And it's like, if you have to laugh. You have to hire somebody that's just going to laugh when they get locked in your bathroom with you. And if they're not that person, they're not the person who's going to do all the other stuff either, And so we were both laughing. And actually, Jerry, that's his name, he had his credit card on him. And my boyfriend was like talking him into how to like jimmy the door and break into it. We got out. And then I called my super and said, okay, you got to come up and fix this. But, that's exactly how I feel. I'm like, come on, it's just, we're going to have a really good laugh about that,
Otherwise, you'd be joining us from your bathroom right now.
I would be. I was ready to like break the handle. I was like, we're getting out of here. So it seems like every apartment I've lived in, I've had an issue with the bathroom door for some reason.
Oh no!
But it's like, it wouldn't be a New York City apartment if you didn't have something like that, right?
Right.
So treat people well, and they'll laugh when they're sitting in your lap and you're getting a shot in a car, or you lock yourself in the bathroom, or it's 27 degrees and you're asking them to do a scene in a cocktail dress. It's like you put some gratefulness toward them, and they'll do that. And if you're not, then I probably won't work with you again. Because if you can't laugh, what are you going to do?
Right. People need to be willing to get locked in a bathroom with you.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
See, you know what? I'll save the joke for later. Lisa, you have such incredible vision. You are so incredibly well versed in not only what you are speaking to, but also in your work. So everything that you're saying, I feel like, shows up in your work, and it's very evident from that.
Thank you very much.
This has been an absolute pleasure.
Yes, I agree. I've really enjoyed it.
We want to make sure that all of your social medias are covered, especially for our audio listeners.
Yes.
What are some of the best platforms to contact you with, and is there anything else that you would like to share?
Yeah, well, I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Lisa Stock Film, also Titania Film. My website is lisastockfilm.com. My Patreon is patreon.com/Lisa Stock. And those are really the best places to reach me. And I think I've probably said it all. I can look at my little notes here, but I think, I went through, and you guys were great to talk with, and I really enjoyed it. So
thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And I love what you do. I mean, I right from the beginning, I got your first issue, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And I've been following you, Emily, and your photography for a while. So
thank you.
Yeah, I look forward to what you guys are doing next. And I love the podcast, and thank you for having me on.
Of course. Yeah, thanks for joining us. That's really nice that you follow me as well. I appreciate that.
No, it was on Twitter, and I was like, wait, I've been following her for a long time over here. Yeah. Yes.
Because it's complicated, and I totally am.
It's under Emily Kramer Art. That's the one I've been following.
Oh, okay,
and I was
good.
Like, she does modern romantics. Awesome.
Okay, because I hardly ever post to Twitter because I don't love it, and I have that account, but I almost ignore it.
Well, it's social media it's such a love-hate relationship, and it has its good things and its downside, and
and I can't keep up with all of them. There are too many.
There are.
So
there are, but I'm mostly on Instagram. I think
I followed you on Instagram too.
Oh, good.
So
thank you.
Cool. Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
I was going to say it was nice to meet you in person, sort of.
Yeah,
maybe we'll actually meet in person at some point. That would be awesome. Let me know if you ever get to the city, and or if you find a castle and decide to move there and have an artist working retreat.
We're just gonna buy a castle or build one.
There you go.
We need that Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Hey, look, if you want to go out, I think you can still get tickets for the lottery. It's up to $1.9 billion at this point.
We could build a couple of castles.
Absolutely.
And fly everyone over there.
I think that would be a worthy use of the money.
There you go.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, please give Lisa a follow. Please go check out her films. They're incredible.
Do it. Thank you.
Please go support her Patreon. We also want to give a shout out to our moderators and our producers for this and every episode. This episode, along with every other episode forever and ever and ever, is in memory of Joe Capone, our moderator, fellow comedian, critic, encourager, and great friend. You can listen for free. Everybody's favorite four-letter word. You can find us pretty much wherever you can tune into podcasts. For updates, announcements, and info on our upcoming tour, please follow us on social media. So the other thing that we would like to say is tonight's stream, if you're joining us for the first time, or if you're joining us for the 26th time, you know that at the end of our podcast, we do like to go and support other creators on Twitch. And we do that by rating the other channel. There's nothing that you need to do on our side. We'll take care of everything on our side. All you need to do is once you get to that other page, just go ahead and click into it, comment something, say hello, let them know that you are from the Modern Romantic page and that you're there to support them, so that we can support other people. The goal of our channel is, through rating, is to show that Twitch is not only a place for gamers, it is a place for fellow creators of many, many different kinds. And I say all of that to ask Emily, tonight, who are we rating?
Tonight we're rating the Glass Moon Man, who is doing
Ooh.
glass blowing.
Oh,
Ooh.
do you watch that show on Netflix about the glass blowers? It's like
No, but now I might.
yes. I will ping you and tell you what it's called. It's like the competition, and then every week somebody,
Oh, yeah.
goes home and but they're amazing. They're amazing. It's up at the Cornell, I think it is, up here, the big glass blowing museum. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. That's beautiful. What's his name again?
It's Glass Moon Man.
Glass Moon Man. That is a great name.
It says it doesn't have his real name. I'm assuming that it says my name is Moon Man, so I'm gonna go with that's probably just his Twitch name. But who knows? Also, Kaz said, "Thank you for coming on to the Modern Romantic to talk to us. It was super interesting."
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you thought so. I really enjoyed it. It was great to meet you guys.
Yeah, thank you. We're gonna thank you and you us, and we could do this forever.
Thank you.
Forever.
Thank you.
Infinite gratitude.
As we're rating out tonight, Lisa, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but pretend that you have just received an Oscar for one of your films.
Yes.
Please give us a speech.
A speech to who I would thank if I was.
Oh, I love
that.
this.
Well,
This is a good one.
I would say first and foremost my parents, who, like I said, when I told them at 4 years old I was going to be a movie director, they just said, "Okay, you go for it." I would also thank all of those teachers that I had that encouraged me to use my imagination and encouraged me in general. I would thank all of my cast members, past and present, who have come on this crazy journey with me. And, the people, that supported the Kickstarters and the Indiegogos and the Patreon, because not most of us, are not born wealthy, and we don't have the connections to money, or in my case, I don't necessarily want bean counters putting their fingers in my paint, as they say. And I want to keep my vision and my voice and, be able to make my story. And it's those folks, all of those folks that I've just mentioned, that make it possible for me to do what I do. And so go out, use your imagination, go out, follow your dreams. There's a restaurant up here, one of my favorites, Angelica's uptown, and above the door, they have a sign that says, "Don't quit your daydream."
Oh, I like that.
So that's what I would tell everyone.
Oh.
Don't quit your daydream. It can fit in.
Yeah.
And thank you.
I'm going to put that sign on my wall. I like that. Okay, we're rating. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Love that speech.
Good night, guys.
Congratulations on your faux Oscar.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so we rated. We're the only three that can hear each other now.
Okay.
So I'm going to.
This was super fun, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I'm glad you did.
I
You
loved
said yes. And wait, you contacted us though, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah, I remember now. I'm glad you said yes to that.
Welcome,
But
readers.
this is like what you do. That's the kind of thing I want to be a part of, And it's, I was like, holy cow, I would love to be on that. So,
thanks for
yeah.
doing it. We actually,
Yeah.
due to many reasons, mostly financial.
Emily,
What?
they can still hear us through the raid.
Oh.
At the Modern Romantic